from the Māori. It takes away from the stewardship that we need to actually leave things alone sometimes.
Leave things alone. Hey, on that note, Arborist Paul Gosling, kia ora Paul, and a big kia ora to you, David Cormack and Cindy Mitchell. You've been wonderful this afternoon. I appreciate your time. And thank you to Amelia for putting the show together this week, and lovely to be back with you this week. I'm back 3:45.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Haere ake nei, MIQ has scored itself a spot in court. A group of Kiwis stranded offshore is challenging the legality of the whole isolation and quarantine system, filing High Court papers this afternoon seeking an urgent hearing. Meanwhile, there's 44 new Delta cases today, 3 of them in Waikato. Northland standing by for more details after an infected person travelled between Auckland and Whangārei and back again. A Waikato house made from 20,000 bottles needs, well, a mega bottle stopper after springing a mystery leak. And lockdown has affected our furry friends too. We're at the SPCA where they're expecting a bumper kitten season. Warning, cute pictures to come.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Nissan Bolivinaka, I'm Marama Tipole. An Auckland police officer has tested positive for COVID-19 and 3 others are self-isolating after coming into contact with a person who was later shown to have the virus. The officer was fully vaccinated. Kate Gregan reports.
The 4 officers were responding to an incident involving a woman who they took to Auckland Hospital for a mental health assessment on Tuesday. Upon arrival at the hospital, it was established the woman was displaying COVID-like symptoms and she subsequently tested positive. The 4 officers who had been dealing with the woman were stood down the same day to be tested and self-isolate. Late last night, one of these officers returned a positive result. The other 3 officers have since returned a negative day 1 test and will continue to self-isolate and be regularly tested.
The Outpatient Department at Green Lane Clinical Centre in Auckland is the latest hospital area to be listed as a location of interest for COVID. In a statement this afternoon, the Ministry of Health is asking anyone at the department on Monday from noon to 2 in the afternoon to monitor for symptoms. If any develop, they need to get a COVID test. The most recent release also shows areas of interest from yesterday for the BP on Great South Road in Manukau about 1:50pm, as well as the Inverell Superette in Wiri between 9 in the morning and just after 10. George's Beach Club in Raglan has also been named on Sunday after 2pm. There are 3 new community cases in Waikato today, taking the total number of coronavirus cases there to 25. The new cases are all linked and contacts of existing cases. Another location of interest has also been added in Hamilton, making the total in the city now 6. Leah Tibbett has more.
It is unclear at this stage where in the Waikato DHB area the 3 new cases are, after a positive case in both Karapiro and Kawhia resulted in an extension of the lockdown border. However, a record number of vaccinations were given yesterday across the Waikato and King Country, with almost 10,500 doses. That's a 4% increase of first doses in one day. Vaccination rates across the region have now reached 77% for a first dose and 52% have received their second shot. The Waikato DHB expects the number of locations of interest to grow over the coming days as more cases are identified.
Auckland has recorded 41 new cases today. The Director of Public Health, Dr Caroline Makone, says today's higher case figures are not unexpected, as there have been a number of contacts of new cases. Close to 30,000 COVID tests were done in the last 24 hours, just over 10,000 of them in Auckland. A 4-square in Hamilton has just been added to the locations of interest by the Ministry of Health. Anyone in the 4-square on Heafy Terrace, Fairfield last Friday between 2:30 and 3:15 in the afternoon, or on Tuesday from 10:20 to 11 in the morning has been warned to monitor for COVID. The ministry is also calling on anyone who was in the chemist warehouse in Flatbush on Thursday of last week between 3 and 3:20pm to stay home and get tested immediately. Te Tai Tokerau remains on edge while contact tracers determine if there are any locations of interest in the region. None have been listed so far after an essential worker who visited the region tested COVID-19 positive in Whangārei on Monday and again upon returning to Auckland. Northland is one of the least vaccinated regions. Just 2/3 of residents have had a Pfizer dose. Te Hau Awhiowhio o Whangārei Trust Chief Executive Martin Kaipo says in his community one anti-vaxxer can hold back a whole whānau.
Who else are they going to drag into this to get infected by their bad choice?
Martin Kaipo fears it will take a death or serious illness to outweigh vaccine misinformation in Northland. The police non-emergency line 105 is back up and running after a Vodafone network fault. However, there may be delays getting through because of high call volumes. The emergency 111 line is not affected. It's 5:04. The All Blacks hooker Dane Coles is looking for 40 minutes of fun when he turns out for Wellington against Canterbury tonight. Coles and Canterbury's Sam Whitelock will both play tonight before linking up with the All Blacks in the United States next week. Both sides have plenty to play for, with Canterbury 5th on the NPC Premiership table and Wellington 6th.
Just blow out all the cobwebs, mate. Run around like a headless chicken and have a bit of fun, to be fair. I suppose just getting back into the stuff for hooker, throwing the ball and a bit of scrum work and, not trying to, I suppose, overcomplicate it and just keep things really simple and have a bit of fun.
Dane Coles. Troubled Warriors prop Kane Evans is leaving the NRL side despite having a year to run on his contract. Evans had a tumultuous first year with the Warriors, being fined $5,000 for writing an explicit message on his strapping during a game in July, and then being given a 6-game suspension for fighting in the side's final game of the year. Evans and the club have agreed to part ways, with the prop set to join English Super League club Hull. And the Aotearoa men's netball squad to play the Silver Ferns has had to draft in another 6 more players as they await travel exemptions for several players initially selected. The side is due to play 3 matches against the Silver Ferns, the first of which is in Wellington on Sunday. However, 5 Auckland-based players, including captain Cruz Tangira and another in Waikato, have yet to be given COVID travel exemptions. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Billy Connolly on being, as the title of his autobiography has it, windswept and interesting. Rob Rua, one of the most influential contemporary Maori musicians. And Devery Jacobs, star of a new North American series Taika Waititi has created. It's a comedy, but it deals with some very dark issues affecting Indigenous people. Ko Kim Hilaho, join me tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northern and western areas from Northland to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty and the central high country. Fine spells and a few showers, but showers clearing from Bay of Plenty tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay scattered showers with possible thunderstorms inland, clearing tonight but returning tomorrow afternoon. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Mainly fine today, a few showers tomorrow, possibly heavy in the afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine, but evening showers about Nelson. Showers everywhere tomorrow, with afternoon thunderstorms and hail north of Christchurch. Bulla, Westland and Fiordland expect periods of rain or showers, with possible thunderstorms in Fiordland today. Showers clearing south of Greymouth tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, showers becoming widespread today, then clearing to fine tomorrow afternoon or evening. And for the Chatham Islands, expect periods of rain. RNZ National, it's 5:07.
Kia ora rā marama, tēnā koutou katoa no mai haere mai ki checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. It's been described as a lottery in human misery, and now MIQ faces potentially its biggest challenge yet, in court. This afternoon, the group known as Grounded Kiwis filed documents in the High Court in Wellington. It alleges the COVID Response Minister, Health Minister and the boss of MB have all broken the law in the way they set up and are running managed isolation and quarantine. Grounded Kiwis attorneys is seeking a court order stopping the government from continuing to operate MIQ in this way. We'll have more details on the case shortly. But first, over the past months, you've heard the stories of people desperate to get an MIQ voucher and get home to see dying loved ones, elderly parents, care for children or have a child, reunite with a spouse or family, or avoid getting their pension cut. And most recently, would-be returnees have been piling into the virtual lobby, vying for a voucher, with thousands and thousands left disappointed.
To be honest, it's kind of, it's distressing, and it feels a little bit humiliating to have to be kind of taking a lottery ticket to come back home.
I jumped on and I think they said 5,000 rooms and I was like number 12,000 or something, so I just gave up pretty quickly.
The government has made it completely unflexible for us. They have failed us as New Zealand citizens. We are entitled to come home just like anybody else around the world is.
Absolutely ignored. We haven't had one message. I did have a message from Jacinta sent out to all New Zealanders, finishing up, be kind to each other. And I thought, well, that would be nice.
It's not a nice feeling to know you cannot go home and you have no idea when you can go home, and your pension is going to be stopped and you're going to have to repay 6 months of the pension. No kindness coming our way.
I don't want to be here, but I have no choice.
Yeah, the whole thing has changed my feelings massively about home, and that's a very tender part of it. But mainly I want to see my dad. He's unwell, and I want to see him while he remembers me, is what I'll say, yeah.
Well, joining us now is lawyer and Grounded Kiwi spokesperson Alexandra Burt. Kia ora, Alexandra. I mean, going to court is a big step. How has it come to this?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, going to court is a big step, and this is not a decision that we've come to lightly. But we believe that the courts play an important role in a democratic society to act as a check on government's exercise of power. And what we've been seeing here with the MIQ system is that the government has been limiting New Zealanders' right to return in a way that has never been limited before. And we've just heard in the montage you played the human impact side of this story. And we believe that it is the role of the courts to assess the situation and to come to a conclusion as to whether or not this is in fact a justified limitation.
Yeah, so who is the case against per se, and what is it that you're alleging?
So the respondents in the case are the Minister of Health, the Minister of COVID Respondents, and the Chief Executive of the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. And in essence, the case alleges that the way the MIQ system has been set up and operated is unlawful, unreasonable, and a breach of Section 18.2 of the Bill of Rights Act, which is the section that protects the right of New Zealanders to return to New Zealand.
Do you accept that there is a need, though, to have some form of managed isolation and quarantine?
Absolutely, and this case isn't about the need for managed isolation, and managed isolation has played a very important role in keeping New Zealanders safe. But what the case is about is this current MIQ system and the way this system has been set up and operated, and the limitation that this system places on the right of New Zealanders.
So we'll get to that in a little bit more detail, but also one of the allegations is that the COVID minister, Chris Hipkins, has breached public expectations. What do you mean by that?
So when the MIQ system was first set up in late 2020, it was set up by a managed isolation system. I mean the MIAS, which is the online allocation system that requires individuals to obtain a voucher to enter New Zealand, because that is the point in time where this issue started developing, I guess. And with that system, it was set up quite quickly. And in November, there was a briefing note that was issued to the minister about the system and about potential issues with the system. And one of those issues that was identified was the fact that the system may need to be adapted to ensure that demand could be met and to mitigate any risks that New Zealanders would face unjustified delays in entering New Zealanders. And that note said that that needed to be addressed as a matter of priority. What we see almost 12 months on is that has not been addressed, and instead it's become harder and harder and harder to enter New Zealand, and those delays have become longer.
So is it an issue of the number of places available? Because in terms of the lobby, really, that's our first opportunity to see how many people are vying for a spot and how many people are actually getting it. Is it that there is just simply not enough spots on offer in your argument?
So yes, it is that there's not enough spots. So demand far outstrips supply, and the issue here is that the supply is insufficient, but it's also the failure to consider alternatives. For example, there's people who are in the current lottery system seeking to obtain spots, and in some cases, very limited cases, are obtaining them coming from places like Western Australia or Queensland, where there is very, very low COVID cases and those people are vaccinated. But there's no method in the system at the moment for those people to be able to isolate at home, for example. Those people are required to enter the lottery and to obtain a voucher to stay for 14 days in a hotel, just the same as everyone else, essentially meaning that supply is limited further by people who potentially don't need to use that form of the system.
Alexandra, do you have any insight as to why it seems that the number of people wanting MIQ has absolutely ballooned?
I think that with the lottery system, we've been able to see the numbers. It's the first time that there's been quantifiable data on the number of New Zealanders trying to return. And I should also add that that's not absolute data, because there are thousands of people who are deciding not to enter the system, either because they want to let others who are more desperate to get home first. A couple of people that we've seen have said they, from a mental health perspective, can't handle the anxiety involved in the system. So that isn't an absolute number, but it's the first time we've been able to see the numbers wanting to get back. But the issue existed under the previous first and first served model, where people were constantly refreshing and using bots and scripts and anything they could possibly use to try and get a spot. So this is not a new problem. It's just the first time that we've had some numbers associated with it. And that is also part of the problem. There hasn't been sufficient data collected about the system for the government to make informed choices about how the system should be operated.
So you've got this far using a number of volunteers, lawyers from all over the world, and you've got a New Zealand QC who's been working pro bono on this case, but there's costs involved here. I mean, how are you going to fund this court action?
So yes, you're correct that so far we've had an amazing network of volunteers around the globe who have been working on a pro bono basis. We now need to get the case to court, and as you said, that is a costly exercise. So we've today launched a crowdfunding page on Give a Little for the Grounded Kiwis Group legal action to seek to raise funds to be able to pay the cost to bring this case to trial. Because as we said, we think this is an extremely important public interest case, and that it's one that needs to be heard by the courts. So we're hoping that we're able to raise the funds required to do that.
And Alexandra, just to be clear, there is no particular named individual in this case where they alone would benefit. Is it correct to say that should you be successful, it will have universal implications for everybody looking to get an MIQ spot?
That's correct. So Grounded Kiwis Group is in the process of incorporating as a society, and we're bringing the case in our capacity as an incorporated society. As you said, almost a representative, I guess, of the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of New Zealanders who have been impacted and are still impacted by the MIQ system. And in terms of the outcome, you're correct that it may not have impact for an individual case, but what we're hoping is that it has a wider impact and causes systemic change that will enable New Zealanders to return home.
Thank you for joining us this evening. That is Alexandra Burt from Grounded Kiwis, and they have lodged legal action today at the High Court in Wellington, seeking a judicial review about the way MIQ was set up and is operated. Homai o whakaro, love your feedback. Nō reira ane na kaupapa mo te hōtaka nei. Do you think this needs to be sorted in court? That, there needs to be some legal ruling on where the line is in terms of Kiwis' freedoms and the government's right to limited access to the country during a pandemic. And what's a better option if not this form of MIQ? Pātui mai, text me 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. In breaking news, police have arrested and charged a 43-year-old woman with murder following the discovery of a body at a Dunedin property today. The body was discovered in Tanner Road in the suburb of Glenleith. The woman will appear in Dunedin District Court tomorrow. Parts of South Auckland, along with the Barrier Islands and Wellsford, are among the worst in the region when it comes to vaccination rates per 1,000 people. Data released by the Ministry of Health shows the suburb of Otara has the lowest uptake. Just 62% of people have received one Pfizer vaccine and 36% 2 shots. Our reporter Nick Trubridge and cameraman Nick Monroe went to find out why.
Otara Town Centre, the first Friday of Step 1 in Auckland's Roadmap to Freedom. Friday takeaways are on the cards. Meat for the barbecue is too. But what about some Pfizer shots? First, the good news. Despite low vaccination rates compared to the rest of Tamaki Makaurau, most out shopping here today have had at least one shot.
Yeah, I'm double vaxxed. Yeah.
No question, no comment.
Yes, I have, yes.
Yes, both of us has been vaccinated.
Some have had one after a little convincing.
I didn't want my vaccination, but I got forced by my mum.
Well, it's for the sake of my family and the loved ones. If it's to protect yourself from the virus, then you got to do. I mean, it's your decision, but then if you're making the right choice, then it's just to protect yourself and the family as well.
Then there's those who explain why people shouldn't have to get the shot.
To be honest with you, I think everyone should have their own, rights. You can't just force someone to do something that they don't want to do. I mean, I'm not against it, but if you want to get it done, get it done.
Others here in Otara who have had the shot offer some insight as to why others simply won't do the same.
It really pisses me off when people don't believe in what the doctors and what the scientists are saying about this pandemic.
So a lot of the people are just scared. Yeah. So I reckon they probably want it because I got it for myself because I wanted the protection. So I thought I'm protected. So hopefully I'm protected.
There's a conflict here where people are saying, don't take the test because this is what, And it's the social media that's kind of like making them think, I'm not going to take it because this is going to happen.
I think they should think about one thing. Who's looking after them here in New Zealand? It's us in the hospital or people that are posting video online. People are making a lot of money on social media, YouTube, Facebook.
And from some, a plea.
No, just get it because soon it's going to be mandatory for everyone to have one. And with travelling and everything working, it's going to become mandatory, I reckon.
Get the vaccine. Safe. Don't get regret. Mark my word. Don't regret it when you're on the bed.
This man works at a hospital and says he's seen firsthand just how bad COVID can be.
I work in theatre. So part of our job is putting people to under the ventilator, intubated people because they suffer from COVID or Delta or whatever. So I've seen them in ICU. It's not good.
Time will tell whether people here open up to that message so suburbs like Otara can open up too.
And Nick Trubridge joins us now from Tamaki in East Auckland, where there's a big vaccine push on tonight. So Nick, fill us in, what's happening there?
Yeah, Lisa, as you say, big vaccine push tonight, and it goes all the way through until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. There's sort of a steady stream of people coming through at the moment, and I've got with me Tiara, who is the site manager here at the Tamaki vaccination site. Tiara, we just heard from a couple of people who, are still a little bit unsure about the vaccine and that package. What are you doing to try and get those people along?
Oh, kia ora. So what we're doing is, if they come along, they can talk to one of our nurses or one of our GPs and get some information about the vaccine so they can actually make up their mind. And obviously today we're putting all-nighter, so we're calling all those people that work night shift and can't usually make it during the day. Or it could be that you want to come for date night. Come and grab a coffee, grab a sausage, bring your date. This will be one date to remember. So yeah, come along.
And how has today gone? And tell us a little bit about what success looks like for you guys in the lead up to 6 a.m. tomorrow.
I think for us, as long as people are coming, and this is a time that suits them, coming in the night, they could be working all day, they could be in front of their screens and just wanting to get out of the house. This is a place to come. And I think, if we get a small number, we get large numbers, we'll be happy either way.
Absolutely, thank you very much, Tiara. And Lisa, as Tiara's just pointed out, it is a shot that you get if you come here, but you also get one of these delicious sausages. The bread has just arrived. It's pretty fresh, actually.
And crispy looking too, Nick.
It's pretty tasty. Not bad. It's not bad. I mean, I would come down here, free sausage, free coffee, come and get amongst it.
You get all the good gigs, Nick. That is Nick Trowbridge joining us there from Tamaki in East Auckland. Now, they're doing an all-nighter, as you heard from Nick there, when his mouth wasn't full of barbecued sausage. And as Tiara said there, wow, you could go for date night. Be pretty unique. They're open until 6 a.m. tomorrow morning, so no excuses. It is 24 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. Kia ora rā watu mo te whakarongo mai e haere nei coming up. So it's not just humans hit by lockdown. There's been consequences for our furry friends too. We swing by the SPCA. Tai Tokerau whānau are nervously waiting to see if the region has escaped any COVID spread after a positive case visited the region. The Ministry of Health has yet to release any locations of interest linked to the case, which had travelled north from Auckland. That's put locals on edge, but some fear it will take a tragedy to hammer home the major risk Delta poses for unvaccinated Northlanders. Nei te kai ripoata, Anita Blake-Person.
A COVID outbreak in Te Tai Tokerau could be devastating for the north, the country's least vaccinated region. Last night, the Health Ministry confirmed Delta has visited Northland, but it's not yet known if it's left any lasting impression. The news was a wake-up for many in Whangārei today, where the Seminoff Stadium mass vaccination clinic had a flood of walk-ins.
Just got to do your bit, hopefully free ourselves up and don't overwhelm the hospitals, really, is what I done it for.
I just saw a sign up in Kensington that said no booking required, so I just pulled in to get it done.
My parents kind of persuaded me into getting the vaccine, had a couple of speeding fines, so they're just like, go get the vaccine, we'll pay your speeding tickets. I was like, okay.
Nurses here were vaccinating an average of one person every minute this morning, and it only got busier. Many expressed disappointment about the low vaccination rates in the region, among them Eli Sharplin from Kaipara.
With our vaccination rates, we really dropped the ball, and we should have all been vaccinated 6 months ago. We should have been at 80-90% 6 months ago.
The Auckland resident, who initially returned a weak positive result during a test in Whangārei on Monday, returned a second positive last night and has since gone into managed isolation. The ministry this afternoon said their interview with that person was ongoing. While the person was clearly allowed through the border, the ministry wouldn't confirm they are an essential worker. Testing centres across Whangārei were relatively quiet today. Nurse Nancy Busby says there was some nervousness as people waited to see where the case had been.
We've had a bit of a rush first thing this morning, quietened down a bit. We're having a few more come in now for testing, but we're managing.
Northland Taniwha rugby players, including Pisei Leilua, among those getting a swab.
The coach told us to come here and do our test and make sure we protect the community and protect our families as well when we go home, make sure they're safe and sound and, no one's affected by this pandemic.
But he says people need to be proactive about keeping safe.
We shouldn't get to this point to be scared and then start moving, we should already be vaccinated and get tested way before this, so yeah.
Martin Kaipo is the CEO at Te Haua Whiowhio o Whangārei Trust, which has been vaccinating and testing in the Whangārei suburb of Whangārei. He says there's a lot of anti-vaccine messaging being spread in his community, which has some of the lowest vaccination rates in the district.
Whoever set the seeds out there, those so-called theorists, have set the seeds out where it's starting to influence other whānau members. Until we have more deaths, until we have more hospitalisations, until they become the victims of the Delta variant, only then that we can say we should have, we could have, but we didn't.
His teams are working hard to combat that misinformation, but he says Māori health providers need more resourcing, and he fears it could take a death or serious illness to convince people of Delta's threat.
Those who have died overseas have been the non-vaccinated ones. Our only tragedy is who else are they going to drag into this to get infected by their bad choice.
National MP and former Whangārei GP Dr Shane Reti is back in the region helping vaccinators. He told Midday Report Tai Tōkaro started behind the rest of the country with its vaccine attitude.
So if we look at before coronavirus, if we look at those adults who had refused to have their children vaccinated and registered as such on the National Immunisation Register, Northland was one of the highest anyway, about 12 to 15% as I recall. And what's happened with coronavirus is that's been amplified. It's been amplified in all areas, but because we were starting from a high rate anyway, it appears to be even more here in Northland.
Dr Shane Reti says its vital locations of interest in Whangārei are published as soon as possible so people know whether to isolate and keep the community safe.
It is 29 minutes past 5. Kia mau tonu mai. Stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The SPCA is facing their biggest kitten season yet after desexing was put on hold in lockdown. Now they're desperate for foster parents and adoptions to help them catch up with the backlog and to make way for the huge intake they're expecting. Reporter Louise Tanuth and camera operator Marika Habazi paid them a visit.
The SPCA's two Auckland offices are both closed during level 3, but things are slowly starting to begin again. 2 baby kittens are ready for their contactless pickup this morning.
It's a big day.
CEO Andrea Midgen admits lockdown has thrown a spanner in the works.
Well, it's really tough because people can't bring animals in as easily. We're getting a backlog because we've only got small teams operating to make sure we keep everybody safe. We haven't been able to de-sex as much as we want to do, and kitten season has already started.
There's reduced staffing to form bubbles, and call-outs are still for emergencies only. But finally, adoptions are back, level 3 style.
A couple of years ago, you'd say it never would have worked, but we have all our animals up on the website. There's a profile about each animal, so you can have a look, see what you're interested in, then you make an application, and then we just by phone or video call work with the potential adopter and talk about the animal. And if it's a cat, it's a little bit easier because they can usually integrate into the household easier. If it's a dog, we still do managed meet and greets because it's really important that you get that right relationship going from the start.
But now summer is approaching. The biggest task they're facing is catching up on desexing cats.
Well, we have about 2,000 animals across the country in our centres. Some of them have been desexed, but there's hundreds that haven't yet.
That's why they're calling for people to foster animals to help speed up the process, particularly kittens and rabbits. Here's Support Services Manager Laura Miller.
Our biggest need is to try and get as many foster parents on board, trained up and ready to go before we get the huge wave that we're expecting of kittens once the weather warms up. That's our big panic at the moment.
The fostering is to get the animals ready for adoption until they're old enough and the right weight. The Staffy pup Hazel is ready for adoption after weeks of fostering. It could be just a few weeks before they're ready, but for their newborn kittens, it takes a lot of love.
They're immune compromised and they're still being fed milk. So they need kind of hourly feeds to begin with, or 2 hourly feeds. And then as they get older, they need less and less care. They're a joy, but they're also a lot of work.
Training for fostering newborn kittens is done virtually in level 3. Once the fostering is over, the next challenge is finding a permanent family for the pet. The next couple of months are daunting.
So we have about 220 animals that are currently out at foster, and we expect they'll filter through to adoption for the next few months, and then on top of that we'll start getting into our kitten season. And once we hit about February, that's when we have large numbers of animals that are looking for homes.
As Auckland remains in Alert Level 3, they're hoping all this time at home is the perfect motivation to add a furry friend to people's bubbles.
And if you were listening to that on radio, we'll put the video from Louise and Marika's piece up online. Buckets of cuteness there. Friends for life. Kia ora, e te iwi e haere ake nei a checkpoint. Concerns low vaccination rates could mean the perfect storm for Māori as COVID seeps into different corners of the motu. More on the legal challenge to MIQ, and it's Friday, so you might have just cracked a cold one, so ponder this. How to find a leak in a house built with 20,000 booze bottles. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme tonight. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time now for the headlines. Ane Amarama Mena Pitapita Kōrero.
Thank you, Lisa. One Auckland police officer has tested positive for COVID-19 and 3 others have had initial negative tests after coming into contact with an infected woman. The 4 officers took the woman to Auckland Hospital for a mental health assessment on Tuesday, and she later tested positive for the virus. All 4 officers were stood down the same day to be tested and self-isolate. Auckland has recorded 41 new cases today, 12 of which are not linked to existing clusters. The outpatient department at Auckland's Green Lane Clinical Centre is the latest hospital area listed as a location of interest for COVID. The Ministry of Health is asking anyone who was there on Monday from noon to 2 p.m. to monitor for symptoms. There are 3 new community cases in Waikato, taking the total number there to 25. The new cases are all linked and contacts of existing cases. Another location of interest has also been added in Hamilton, making the total in the city now 6. A 43-year-old woman has been charged with murder after police found a body at a Tanner Road house in the Dunedin suburb of Glenleith. Late last month, Dunedin police appealed for information about a woman who had been missing for more than a month. Detective Senior Sergeant Rob Hanna says they cannot release any further details of the victim until formal identification takes place. Te Tai Tokerau remains on edge while COVID-19 contact tracers determine if there are any locations of interest in the region. None have been listed so far after an essential worker who visited the region tested positive in Whangārei on Monday and again upon returning to Auckland. Northland is one of the least vaccinated regions. Just 2/3 of residents have had a Pfizer dose. And a date has been set for an urgent court hearing on the Whānau Water Commissioning Agency's request for access to Māori health information. The Ministry is considering the request and expects to make a decision by the end of next week. A hearing has been scheduled in the High Court at Wellington for October the 22nd. Those are our headlines. Our next news and sport update is at 6.
Nā mihi marama, no mai hoki mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Ko taku hoa and nei, ko Nicholas Poynton, who joins us to talk business. Nicholas, this is interesting. Few of the country's biggest companies are claiming the wage subsidy. What, do they not need it? Are they still doing okay?
Yeah, look, there's sort of multifaceted reasons for what's driving sort of a shift in attitude from what we saw last year. But early today, we decided to go through some of the numbers to see what firms are claiming the second time round, and it does stand in stark contrast with what we saw a year ago. So far in New Zealand, they have been the biggest recipient of money since the latest lockdowns have really kicked in, receiving $26 million. They took something like $72 million a year ago. Australian-owned Jetstar, they've received a more modest $800,000. That's compared with about $3 million last year. Auckland Airport, $1.1 million versus $4 million. You can see there's a bit of a theme here. It's travel and tourism companies that have been incredibly exposed to the effects of these lockdowns, less sort of flights going through airports, these sorts of things. But I think one of the interesting parts here are the notable exceptions. Because, for instance, you have the Warehouse Group, who some would say paid for the sins of many other firms who took the money last year and proceeded to lay off staff. Also, the Briscoes Group, they can be included as well. And like I mentioned before, the reasons why we have seen a bit of a shift in attitude do seem to be quite multifaceted. For one, when COVID hit last year, the degree of uncertainty was unparalleled. Firms just did not know what to expect. And here you have the government offering them money. They just sort of jumped at the opportunity. But now this time round, firms do have a degree of certainty. They do know what to sort of expect. Also, a lot of companies have raised capital in the past 12 to 18 months. Their balance sheets have been bolstered. They're sort of in a better position to deal with these sorts of disruptions. Also, especially with the likes of some of the retailers. Think Briscoes, think the Warehouse. They have had some incredibly profitable results in the past 12 to 18 months. The Warehouse paid back the wage subsidy and still turned a record profit. So the operational environment has clearly changed for many of these businesses. Firms do have a bit more of an idea about what to expect. The likes of Briscoes, they've looked to actually increase the pay of their staff because there have been sort of skills shortages. The Warehouse gave their staff a pay bonus, but that's not to say that things couldn't change if these current lockdown conditions do drag out.
And I see a nugget buried in the business news here, Nicholas. What is the story about a gold miner?
Yeah, board divisions have broken out at New Talisman Gold Mines. And look, this is probably a company most people have never heard of before, but this NZX-listed gold miner is going through some pretty interesting challenges at the moment. Divisions amongst the company's reconstituted board has actually scuttled plans that it had in place to raise $3.1 million. In a brief statement that was put out to the NZX this morning, the company said these plans fell over because of, quote, differing views and discord amongst the company's new board. They couldn't reach a consensus that was outlined in the capital raising documents, and these issues really stem from some long-held concerns shareholders have had about the company's performance, or lack thereof, and its governance around the board table. And these grievances, they really did come to a head recently at the annual shareholder meeting, where a group of these concerned shareholders banded together and supported the election of an outsider and company critic to its board, and actually blocked the reappointment of another director. This was all about trying to get a representative on the board that would hold the company to account. Shareholders also backed the successful but non-binding motions for the company's CEO, who, side note, we won't get into this, but is also the subject of allegations of market manipulation by the FMA, and its board chair to resign. I mean, look, we just got some news in the past couple of hours that the board chair has actually resigned. So, look, there's been a lot of changes surrounding this company in the past sort of 2 weeks. We did speak to the Shareholders Association. They have been a big supporter of this concerned group of shareholders recently. They say that these eruptions that we're seeing at the moment in this company, they shouldn't come as too much of a surprise. However, they do hope that the directors realise that they are there to serve the shareholders, unite, do some soul-searching and focus on the important tasks at hand.
And Nicholas, let's take a gallop around the Friday market.
Yeah, the NZX is down 18 points to 13,087. It's trading at 16, and the dollar is trading at 69.4 US cents and 95 Australian.
Thanks, Nicholas. Ka kite, that's Nicholas Poynton with Business News. The government's beefing up efforts to vaccinate Māori against COVID-19 by getting the Prime Minister out on the road. Jacinda Ardern's on a whistle-stop tour of the eastern North Island, where some of the vaccination rates are the lowest in the country. This morning she was in Hastings, and our Hawke's Bay reporter Tom Kitchen was there.
Cars are lining up at Te Tai Whenua o Heretaunga for their vaccinations. But today's a bit different. The Prime Minister's arrived too. 27-year-old Raiha Tahuri is pretty excited about the company she had whilst getting her first vaccine.
I got vaccinated with the Prime Minister and two Labour ministers in the car as well. Yeah, it was a cool experience. I didn't plan to do this today. I've been trying to hype myself up to get it, and I think today Jacinda hyped me up to get it.
She had some reservations and wanted to do the research.
I'm not a vaccinated child, so I haven't had any other vaccinations throughout my life. So yeah, those were my reservations. I have a big fear of needles.
But now she feels she's done the research and says the PM gave her the final push.
Yeah, I think it was the Prime Minister that got me over the line, to be honest. She genuinely looked deep, like really deep into my eyes and asked, would you be willing to get vaccinated because I was willing to support you? And I said yes. I genuinely said yes as a role model for others my age as well, because we've got the lowest rates.
In Hastings, just over 30% of Māori are fully vaxxed, while it's about 65% for both Pasifika and Asian and 55% for Pakeha and others. Te Tai Whenua o Heretaunga Chairman Mike Paku says it's rangatahi who desperately need the jab.
It is our under 29s, they're the big unvaccinated group that we have. Good uptake from our kaumātua and queer, so it is that younger age group, and that's where the bulk of our population is.
He believes they still have time up their sleeves before the virus could seep in.
I think we have a window that's still open to us as a country and as a Māori community, and it's supposed to be a 4 to 6 weeks window. We need to make the most of that window. As we can see, I think elimination is kind of out the window.
Te Tai Whenua o Te Whanganuia Orotu CEO Tania Eden says they've been helping with the rollout in and around Napier.
We've been rolling it out at our marae. We also stood up a drive-through at the Hawke's Bay Rugby Union, and now we just need to keep the foot on the pedal here.
That's because there's been a big drop-off, and it's particularly bad in Napier's most deprived suburb.
We're finding it's flatlining now. Māori aren't coming and getting vaccinated. For example, there's 37% in Marae Nui that have received one vaccination, and only 19% in Marae Nui have had 2 vaccinations. So that's a major concern for us.
Jacinda Ardern explains why she's on the tour.
Yesterday and for the next couple of days, an absolute focus on promoting the vaccine program across New Zealand, but also hearing from our providers on the ground what more we can make sure we're doing to support their efforts.
And here's what she's hoping to get out of it.
What can we do to make sure that we're now reaching our rangatahi as well? So that means making sure that our messages answer their questions, that we've got trusted people that they trust who are involved in the rollout, and that we hear what it is that's making them be a bit more hesitant.
She continues her visit tonight and tomorrow, heading to the Gisborne Tairāwhiti region.
While your feedback is flooding in on the issue of grounded Kiwis, this group of stranded Kiwis taking the MIQ system to court. In essence, they've filed papers in the High Court in Wellington for a judicial review of the system that they say is operating unfairly and illegally. Battle lines drawn, half and half, I'd say, at a quick guess. This person says, regarding MIQ, couldn't people have returned earlier? On the other hand, one listener says, well done, grounded Kiwis. Our government talks up being kind. The reality is they are callous towards New Zealanders trapped overseas. Anna reckons she's frustrated with hearing people from overseas can't get back to see sick relatives. My father was unwell recently in Auckland. I couldn't visit from Christchurch due to Auckland's lockdown. He died alone. Very sad to hear that. Anna, do keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. A 100-year-old former East German locksmith has become the oldest person ever to go on trial for Nazi-era crimes. Under Germany's legal convention, he's been named only as Joseph S. Prosecutors say he was complicit in the murders of more than 3,500 people. Here's the BBC's Mike Sanders.
Nearly 80 years have passed since Joseph S. started work in Sachsenhausen. Prosecutors say he stayed there until the Soviet army closed in the spring of 1945. They say he manned the watchtowers. One, Tower A, overlooked the extermination camp, which SS guards with gallows humour dubbed Station Z, the end of the line for tens of thousands of victims. Many were shot, others gassed. Jews, Roma, political opponents, Soviet prisoners of war, Dutch resistance fighters. But a defence lawyer says Joseph S. won't be telling the court what he did and saw in Sachsenhausen, which will disappoint the 17 Holocaust survivors and relatives who've joined the prosecution. The executive vice president of the International Auschwitz Committee, Christoph Hübner, said families yearned for any sign of contrition from the defendant, whose face was hidden behind a blue folder.
They don't get any kind of human reaction. What we are hoping now is that when relatives address the court here on their fathers murdered in Sachsenhausen, that their emotions might reach the human side of the defendant.
A prosecution lawyer, Mehmet Daimegüler, said his client didn't want to punish Josef S. unduly, but to highlight the plight of those who were killed.
My client is not looking for a harsh sentence. That would be absurd. The defendant is a very old man. It's very important to her that the crimes and the murders are put into focus again, especially also the post-war silence on the killings of Sinti and Roma, of whom 450,000 to 500,000 were murdered. No one knows the exact figure.
Other geriatric Nazis sentenced to jail for their part in the Holocaust died before spending any time behind bars. Josef S., who hobbled into court using a walking frame, will doubtless remain free if convicted. But survivors want a reckoning by the time the trial ends, probably in the new year.
It is 12 minutes to 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoints on RNZ National. He muriaki ina pita pita kōrero. After the news at 6, we speak to the QC challenging the MIQ system in court. For Aucklanders, in the midst of 50-odd days in lockdown and 44 COVID new infections today, spare a thought for the state of Victoria, which is in the thick of a serious outbreak, breaking its own daily record with 1,800 COVID cases and 5 deaths overnight. World Watch's Paulina Lau has more.
It's day 64 of lockdown and Victoria has reported its highest number of daily total infections. With more than 1,800 new cases, it's also the biggest tally in any part of Australia since the pandemic started. State Treasurer Tim Pallas made the announcement.
We currently have 16,823 active cases. Sadly, 5 people have lost their lives with COVID-19.
It's the second time the state has broken a record this week. There are currently 620 people in hospital with COVID, and 66% of those patients are unvaccinated. Looking to Europe, Chief Health Officer Professor Brett Sutton says he believes the state could get above a 90% vaccination rate.
We can aim for the highest vaccination coverage possible, and Portugal, with its 97% coverage with vaccines for eligible populations, is a fantastic threshold to aim for. So I'm fully expecting us to get above 90% vaccination coverage, and I think that makes a difference in terms of the stresses on the hospital system.
But cases likely haven't peaked yet. Modelling shows a 7-day average could see 1,400 to 2,900 infections in about 2 weeks. Despite these record highs, there's no change to Victoria's roadmap out of lockdown, and they were thrown a small bone today. Starting tomorrow, Victorians will be allowed to remove their masks to consume alcohol during picnics. Professor Sutton says he's sure it's a welcome change. The state is expected to hit a 70% double-dose vaccination rate around October the 26th. Once that happens, the curfew will ease, travel limits will be expanded, and venues can open outdoors to the fully vaccinated. But residents will have to wait until the 80% double-dose target for significant changes. Meanwhile, police are investigating whether Premier Daniel Andrews breached COVID directions after he was filmed approaching journalists outside Parliament without a face mask. The Premier has apologised and says he would accept the $200 fine. Otherwise, he'll donate the same value to a charity working to support others during the pandemic.
It's a rare throwback to the good old days of amateur rugby. Tomorrow afternoon in Taupō, All Blacks captain Sam Kane will team up with fencers, farmers and forestry workers when he turns out for the King Country provincial side. With his regular provincial side, Bay of Plenty, on a bye week, Kane was looking for a team who could take him as he returns from a long injury layoff and prepares to make his return to the international arena. As Clay Wilson explains, the team known in rugby circles as the Rams were only too happy to help.
King Country Rugby General Manager Kurt McQuilkin never saw it coming. A call from coach Craig Jeffries with news McQuilkin says left both in disbelief.
You're not going to believe this, but we've been offered the Sam Kane services for our match against Whanganui. What do I tell them? And I said, take their arm off.
McQuilkin's eagerness is understandable. And not just because King Country sit bottom of the Heartland Championship, after starting the season with 3 straight losses. It's not every day the All Black captain plays in what is effectively the third tier of the New Zealand rugby pyramid, which is exactly why Kane's All Blacks teammate Dane Coles thought it was a good idea.
I've been trying to play for Half-Whenua for a long time, but unfortunately it didn't happen. But I said, why don't you play Heartland? And he's like, yeah, it's a good idea. So next thing he's playing for King Country Rams. But yeah, I think it's an awesome thing for especially an All Black captain to go back and play grassroots. Big part of New Zealand rugby, big part of our DNA. Just a little bit jealous that he gets to do that. And I'm sure the Butcher Boys will be ripping into him.
The Butcher Boys are Whanganui, who King Country hosts tomorrow afternoon in Taupo, just half an hour from where Kane grew up, in the small central North Island town of Riporoa. King Country coach Craig Jeffreys says the All Black skipper is relishing his grassroots return.
He's genuinely excited. Obviously, coming back from injury would create excitement in any rugby player, and he's excited about that. But also, there seemed to be genuine excitement around the idea of him being involved with the King of the Rams. So, that was pretty nice to hear in his voice.
Jeffreys says in a region home to one of the great All Blacks captains, the late Sir Colin Meads, the news about Kane spread quickly.
It's created a whole level of excitement that we haven't seen for a wee while, and I'm getting a lot of phone calls from people, members of the public that have heard and they want to get in there and be a part of it.
But not everyone is so delighted. Whanganui coach Jason Caskey says it's not ideal the All Blacks captain's one-off appearance comes against his team.
It's a great thing for Heartland Rugby to have a player like that playing. It would be disappointing though for our point of view if you end up missing the final at the end of the year from one game. If it was 3 or 4 games, you'd probably think it was a fair enough thing, but when it's a one game, it can have quite a big influence on the competition.
While the Whanganui players are excited to go up against Kane, Caskey says that clearly goes both ways.
He is All Black captain after all, so you don't get too many players of that quality playing in the competition, so he'll be a massive lift for King Country, I've got no doubt about it. Even just the motivational lift with him being there will be massive.
The good news for the visitors is they won't also have to contend with a big home crowd. With the Taupo region still under COVID Level 2 restrictions, the only people in attendance to witness Kane's return will be a small group of sponsors and selected family and friends of both teams. Kurt McQuilkin is certain they would have had a huge crowd, judging by the calls that have come into the union this week.
Oh, gee, we've had all sorts of requests. People have offered their services for security and all sorts. It's been a pretty big response since his name's popped up.
Big crowd or not, though, McQuilkin says the King Country contingent will do their best to make the most of their time with the All Black skipper.
We'll try and have a few beers with him afterwards under the stand and present him with his King Country tie for his first-class match for us. And he'll be forever in our King Country Rams family.
Kane is set to start the match and is expected to play at least 40 minutes. Tomorrow's game against Whanganui and Taupo kicks off at 2:30.
A small Southland community is rallying to save its star tourist attraction in Australasia's last bottle house. Made from 20,000 bottles, the focal point of Waikato has sprung a leak that needs its own unique form of a bottle stopper. Switzer's Museum and Bottle House chair, Myri Dixon, joins me now. Myri, how did you know you've sprung a leak and where is it in this thing?
Well, unfortunately, it's at the top of the bottle. So it leaks all the way down from the top to the ground.
And how bad is it?
On a wet day, there's quite a puddle in there. So, yes, we'd love to have it fixed.
And have you identified exactly where it's coming in from? Because that's a hell of a lot of bottles, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But the top of the bottle is very much like a ginger beer bottle. So it's just the top part that goes towards the cap is where it's leaking.
So what needs to be done to fix it?
Well, some type of resin or fiberglass or I don't know. Honestly, I don't know. I'm open to any ideas from anybody of how we're going to seal this to stop the water coming in.
So you think it's going to need a little bit of Kiwi ingenuity then?
Oh, most definitely. It was Kiwi ingenuity when it was built, so I'm sure that that's going to carry over.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about its history.
Well, it was built about 1988 by local residents of Waikato, and they were the last generation. It's been passed down to the next generation. And it's 3 stories high, and you sort of wind your way up to the top, and the centre column houses old bottles from the Waikato district, I might add. and it's just a lovely place to be on a hot day, and it's a beautiful view of the bottles. They all shine blue and green and yellow. There's a pattern on it, so it's a lovely thing to look through.
Just to get the record straight, what kind of bottles are they, Mairi?
They are actually wine bottles, but they're older wine bottles. They're probably 30 years old, and they're very thick glass. They're not thin like the wine bottles nowadays.
So how are you going to pay for the patch-up?
Well, we've actually just luckily been given an opportunity to get some funds from the Aglasa Community Board here in Southland, and we have been saving ourselves for that. So we've got a wee bit of money set aside, but unfortunately we don't know yet just whatever we pick how much it's going to cost. So we can't actually say how much we're going to need, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, why is this bottle house such a big deal to the community?
Well, it's an attraction, really. It has nothing to do with the community. It's just an attraction, and a lot of people just come from all over Southland or all over New Zealand, actually, and the world. We get visitors from everywhere just to see it, just to look at the bottle.
Mairi, we're stuck at the moment, right? But give us the pitch for when we're free to move around. Why should we come and check it out?
Because it's a lovely place to visit. We have very central Otago weather, very hot in the summer and cold in the winter, mind you. There's great fishing, there's great golf, there's a lovely motor camp. It's a very child-friendly town. We have a shop, we have the bottle and museum, obviously, and the hotel. There's really everything you could want here. There's tennis courts, the squash courts, there's a lovely hall. We've got all the facilities, all the amenities. It's a great place to visit.
Mairi, sounds like paradise. If only we were free to go. Thank you for joining us and best of luck with the patch-up. That is Mairi Dixon, who is the Switzer Museum and Bottle House chair. They've sprung a leak and they need some ingenuity to work out how exactly they're going to fix it. Let's get to some of your feedback before we hit the news at 6. MIQ flooding in on this and the legal challenge as to whether MIQ is working, whether it was legally set up and the way it's being run. This listener says nobody's right to return is being stopped. What is being reduced is the opportunity to return now. It's a polarising issue because someone else says the MIQ website is bloody complicated. To even get into the lobby, you need to get through a number of steps first. It's not simple or straightforward. Typical bureaucratic process where those who are not IT literate are discriminated against. Information about future release of rooms seems to be focused on social media. No use if you're not on Twitter or Facebook. Another person says this MIQ fiasco needs sorting. Go for it. Such a reasoned and reasonable request. Pam, though, says, I cannot understand the selfishness of these Kiwis who choose to live and work overseas, demanding to come home for Christmas. And we were told, traveller beware, with the Trans-Tasman bubble. So why so many complaints, says Pam. Another person says, why don't they give MIQ slots to the airlines so that you book your airline ticket and get a guaranteed MIQ spot? Or am I missing something? Or is this too easy, says Chris. And this one who reckons citizens should certainly get in ahead of foreign business and sports people.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening, I'm Marama T. A lawyer for the Grounded Kiwis group, Alexandra Britt, has told Checkpoint their court action focuses on the government's failure to include alternatives in MIQ. This afternoon, the group filed documents in the High Court in Wellington, accusing the COVID response minister, the health minister, and the head of MB of breaking the law in the way they set up and are running the managed isolation and quarantine system. Grounded Kiwis is seeking a court order stopping the government from continuing to operate MIQ in this way. Contact tracers are determining if there are any locations of interest in Northland. An essential worker tested COVID-19 positive in Whangārei on Monday and again upon returning to their base in Auckland. Northland is one of the least vaccinated regions. Just 2/3 of residents have had a Pfizer dose. Te Hau Awhiowhio o Whangārei Trust Chief Executive Martin Kaipo says in his community in Whangārei, one anti-vaxxer can hold back a whole whānau. He fears it will take a death or serious illness to outweigh vaccine misinformation in Te Tai Tokerau. Iwi say the likely arrival of Delta in Taranaki doesn't bode well for Māori, with only 24% fully inoculated in the province. Ngā iwi o Taranaki and Ngāti Maniapoto are working with police to monitor the Level 3 border at Mōkau. Te kotahitanga o Te Atiawa chairperson Liana Poutu says iwi members are working in the background to minimise the risk to them. She's concerned about the virus getting into the community.
Our whānau being under-vaccinated and also having underlying health conditions doesn't bode well for our people.
Liana Poutu says Delta's creep outside Auckland should be a wake-up call for people to get vaccinated. A 43-year-old woman has been charged with murder after police found a body at a Glenleith property in Dunedin. The body was found at the Tanner Road house earlier this afternoon. A scene examination is expected to go on for some time. In late September, Dunedin police appealed for information about a woman who'd been missing for more than a month. Detective Senior Sergeant Rob Hanna says police cannot release any further details of the victim until formal identification takes place. The arrested woman will appear in the Dunedin District Court tomorrow. The government says its Māori vaccination campaign is gaining real momentum with a record number of inoculations yesterday. Associate Health Minister Peeni Whangārei says 10,145 vaccines were administered yesterday, the campaign's highest figure so far. 40% of those were first doses. Over the past 3 weeks, the number of first doses received by Māori has increased by nearly 20%. Peeni Whangārei says kaumātua are leading the way, with 91% of those aged 65 and over having had their first dose and 81% now fully vaccinated. Tāmaki Makaurau has also shown a big jump, with more than 65% of Māori in the city now having had their first dose, up from 53% 3 weeks ago. A date has been set for an urgent court hearing on the Whānau Order Commissioning Agency's request for access to Māori health information. The agency wants the information from the Ministry of Health to launch a targeted COVID vaccination program in Māori communities where rates are low. In a minute this afternoon, Justice Mellon said the matter required urgency, although the Ministry of Health is considering the request and expects to make a decision by the end of next week. A hearing has been scheduled in the High Court at Wellington for October the 22nd. 50 people have been charged with breaching alert level restrictions around the country. This includes 13 people in Tāmaki Makaurau and parts of the Waikato under alert level 3 and 37 people around the rest of the motu in level 2. Jean Bell reports.
The charges include failing to comply with the COVID-19 order and assaulting an enforcement officer. 19 people were formally warned in Auckland and Waikato and 16 throughout the rest of the country. The police received almost 4,400 reports of mass gatherings or people or businesses breaking the rules nationwide. More than 500,000 vehicles have been stopped at the checkpoints on Auckland's northern and southern boundaries, while 7,600 vehicles have been turned around.
Surf lifesavers have helped save the life of a fisherman swept off the rocks and into 2-metre swells off Auckland's west coast this afternoon. They say a member of the public managed to throw him a nearby angel ring, and the fisherman was wearing an ill-fitting life jacket, which still probably saved his life. The rescue occurred at O'Neill's Bay near Bethel's Beach just after 1 p.m. The Police Eagle helicopter dropped a swimmer into the water who helped the man return to shore. Lifeguards then took him back to their club's first aid room to treat him for hypothermia before he was flown to hospital by Westpac helicopter. It's 5 minutes past 6. The Canterbury coach Blair Baxter doesn't think the absence of Black Ferns players has taken any shine off tomorrow's Farah Palmer Cup final. 9 Waikato and 6 Canterbury players will miss the game as they've been involved in a Black Ferns camp ahead of their trip to Europe. Baxter doesn't believe the occasion will be diminished.
I hope not, because the girls we've got still involved are awesome. You're young and older athlete, great skill. So you're going to see an awesome display of women's rugby on Saturday from both sides. So whether we've got Black Ferns or not, I think will still be a great product to watch.
Troubled Warriors prop Kane Evans is leaving the NRL side despite having a year to run on his contract. Evans had a tumultuous first year with the club. He was fined $5,000 for writing an explicit message on his strapping during a game in July, and was then given a 6-game suspension for fighting in the team's final game of the year. Evans and the Warriors have agreed to part ways, with Evans set to join English Super League club Hull. The Queen has officially launched the Birmingham Commonwealth Games baton relay at Buckingham Palace. 4,500 athletes from 72 countries are expected to compete at the Games, which start next July. The baton will arrive in New Zealand in March. And Andy Murray is in trouble with his wife after airing his smelly tennis shoes outside a California hotel. His shoes have been stolen, along with his wedding ring, which he ties to the laces when he's playing. It's 6:06. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, James Nakise takes time out from the shower and fried chicken to select this week's mixtape. The Broken Heartbreakers are this week's Friday Night Live act. Country Life is milking sheep and bottling it too. And because Abbott and Costello and Laurel and Hardy both released movies on this date in October, we've got a Sonic Tonic dedicated to duos on Nights with you and me, Brian Crump, after the news at 7 on RNZ National.
And now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Saturday. Northern and western areas from Northland to Manawatu, including Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. Fine spells and a few showers, but showers clearing from Bay of Plenty tomorrow morning. Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, scattered showers with possible thunderstorms inland, clearing tonight but returning tomorrow afternoon. Horowhenua to Wellington, also Wairarapa. Mainly fine, a few showers for tomorrow, possibly heavy in the afternoon. Nelson, Marlborough and Canterbury, mainly fine but evening showers about Nelson. Showers everywhere tomorrow with afternoon thunderstorms and hail north of Christchurch. Bulla, Western and Fiordland, periods of rain or showers. Possible thunderstorms in Fiordland. Showers clearing south of Greymouth tomorrow morning. Otago and Southland, showers becoming widespread today, then clearing to fine tomorrow afternoon or evening. And for the Chatham Islands, expect periods of rain. You're listening to RNZ National. It's 6:08.
Thank you, Marama. No mai, haere mai. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint. Ko Lisa Owen tēnei. The COVID-19 Response Minister, Chris Hipkins, is due to make an announcement tonight regarding the unfolding situation in Northland. It is due to start at 6:30pm. We will take you there live as soon as it happens. In the meantime, it's hoped a court case challenging the legality of the MIQ system and how it's run can be heard before Christmas. The group Grounded Kiwis has filed papers in the High Court in Wellington today, seeking a judicial review of the isolation and quarantine system. It alleges the COVID Response Minister, Health Minister and the boss of MB acted unlawfully and unreasonably in the way they set up and are operating MIQ. Public law specialist Paul Radich, QC, is taking the case for Grounded Kiwis. Under Section 18 of the Bill of Rights Act, every New Zealander has the right to enter the country. And Paul Radich says while the group accepts quarantine is necessary, their real concern is the limited number of hotel rooms available and that it's the only option for Kiwis wanting to return home.
The question is we're only letting about 10% of people in at the moment. About over 30,000 people are applying every time this new lottery system is being run, and only about 3,700, in one case 3,200 rooms are being allocated. So when you're only letting 10% of Kiwis back in, that is the issue for the court. Is that a justifiable limit, or does that go too far?
What is your allegation as to what is unlawful about this system?
Okay. Now, I just want to be careful in the sense that the case is filed, and so I can only describe to you what the case is about and won't go any further than that. But just to describe the case, it looks at the order, the isolation and quarantine order, and it says that the terms of the order itself are beyond that fundamental right I mentioned in Section 18. It says that, in fact, there are some actions that aren't authorised authorised by law at all, and they include the group allocations to groups coming in, the emergency allocation system, and what used to be the first in, first served system, where people would have to get in very quickly with their fingers on the buttons. So those, it is alleged, and this is for the court to consider, weren't authorised, and in some cases still aren't by law. The current, what we call the lottery model, where one is allocated randomly one of the spots, the allegation is that in itself breaches the fundamental right to enter in Section 18. The quarantine order certainly allows an online system, but just limiting it to that 10%, limiting it just to a certain number of hotel rooms is the issue as to whether that goes too far.
You mentioned the emergency allocation system and also the group booking system, right? So
yes.
That's outside of the lobby. You make an application for an emergency allocation, or you go before a committee, in essence, for the group booking system.
Yes.
Is it the allegation that there is, an unofficial merit system operating for those spots?
Well, look, it's just a point that I couldn't get into at this stage, Lisa, because the case will have to be subject to the evidence that's filed. But certainly, and this is as far as I can go for the moment, the allegation is that those systems that are in place, what's called the offline systems, aren't something that's authorised by law, and the way in which they operate in practice is an unreasonable limit on the right to enter.
So what are you asking the court to do?
The plaintiffs, which is Grounded Kiwis Incorporated, a group of stranded Kiwis from around the world who have incorporated to bring the case, are asking the court effectively to declare that the order that is in place and the systems, the practical systems that operate through the website, are in breach of the Bill of Rights Act and are otherwise unlawful and shouldn't be continued in the future.
And, what would be the practical consequences of that if you were to win? Does that mean that the government can no longer continue to operate that system as it is?
If there is a declaration, then that's something that the Crown, that Parliament will need to take into account. And one would expect normally, in terms of the way in which the rule of law principles operate, that with a clear declaration of law from the courts, Parliament would take that into account and make adjustments, would make changes, would take on board the illegality. There are aspects of this, like any application for judicial review, that seeks to quash, it's one of those old words, but it means set aside the order that sets this up. Whether the court would make an award of that sort is yet to be seen, but that's one of the things that's sought, in which case the quarantine order, if the court went that far, would be set aside, and then Parliament would need to reconsider the process.
So, Paul, to be clear, in simple language, are you asking the court to restrain the government from continuing to operate the MIQ system as it stands, if you were to be successful? Is that what you're asking for?
Yes, that's right.
So, most people have time-specific requirements to get back to the country, right? So time is of the essence for them, and they will be watching this case with great interest. How long before it gets heard, and are you asking for the court to, do so quickly?
Look, we will be, and that's something that we might be able to give you a better answer on in the reasonably near future. It's just been filed, and one would normally have good open conversations with Crown Counsel through the Solicitor General as to ways in which a case like this might be expedited. We'd be looking to ask for the court's assistance as well, if it's willing to give it, to take the steps more quickly than would otherwise be the case, and to look at a quick or an urgent hearing date. The arguments in the case are primarily legal, so it's something that should be able to be run quite efficiently. So it's a long way of saying sooner rather than later, we hope, Lisa.
So, Paul, how long would it normally take to get before the courts for a judicial review? Because some people will be anxious to see an outcome before Christmas. Is this a possibility?
Look, we would certainly hope. And again, I don't want to and can't say too much ahead of talking to the Solicitor General or those that are appointed. But we would certainly be hoping that would be the timeline.
I understand so far your work's been pro bono. Why have you got involved in this?
Well, it's one of those cases where an approach was made by a group of New Zealand lawyers who are now in different parts of the world to have a look at it, and it's a public interest issue. It's very important, I think, for barristers and members of the profession, particularly when you have an issue of this sort where the court's being asked to act as a check on government power, to enable the issues to be brought before the court, and certainly it's one of those things we do as barristers. We bring whenever we can, if it's in the public interest to do so. We will act on a pro bono basis. Certainly Grounded Kiwis is looking to crowdfund for later parts of the case.
And that's Paul Radich QC, and he's representing Grounded Kiwis. They filed documents at the High Court in Wellington today, and they're seeking a judicial review of the MIQ system and the way it is operating. So much feedback on this. Let's do a little bit of it now. This person says this has only been a problem recently. We have obtained multiple spots. The difference is Delta. Further, many in the lobby are New Zealanders planning to travel. The lottery system is just that, a lottery, and there are many examples of people looking to go offshore and return. Grounded Kiwis are not upfront about any of this. No one needed to wait years. They chose to wait and Delta caught them. It's difficult, but this is not helpful. On the other hand, this listener says, I have lived in New Zealand for 15 years with my Kiwi husband. I would just like to go home to see family and friends in the UK and then come back to family here. And I'm tired of this being portrayed as some kind of jaunt. I tried to get a spot in MIQ for my brother's wedding in August, but it was hopeless. I haven't tried again, as I'm aware there are people who are much more desperate to get into MIQ than I am. The MIQ was acceptable at the beginning of the pandemic, but just can't go on any longer. And this one, MIQ must be extremely labour intensive and expensive. Nobody mentions this. Does the country have the resources to increase this? As for letting people isolate at home, experience has taught us that this is not foolproof and people don't respect the trust put in them. Do keep your feedback coming. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Just a reminder, we'll be doing an extended Checkpoint program today, staying on air beyond 6:30. The COVID response minister is expected to give a press conference starting at 6:30. This is to update everybody on the situation in Northland, where there is a positive case who travelled from Auckland to Northland and back out again. We're expecting the COVID minister to update us on the response to that case starting at 6:30, and we'll cross there live as soon as it happens. Taranaki health officials fear low vaccination rates in the province make Delta's imminent arrival a perfect storm for Māori. Earlier this week, only 24% of Taranaki Māori were fully vaccinated, while just under 40% of the general population had both jabs, two of the lowest rates in the country. Our Taranaki Whanganui reporter Robin Martin has more.
The Alert Level 3 boundary is now hard up against the Taranaki border at Mokau, where iwi are working with police to coordinate checkpoints limiting access to the province. But essential workers and those deemed to have genuine reasons to travel have still been making their way through today. Taranaki Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Jonathan Jarman, says it's always been inevitable COVID would eventually enter the region, and that's bad news for Māori.
It's really a perfect storm of risk factors. It's low vaccination coverage, larger bubbles, more health conditions, more people have health conditions that make them at higher risk and are more likely to go into hospital with severe disease.
Dr. Jarman says there are only two ways out of this pandemic. People either get immunity through a vaccination or getting the disease.
And this disease is really infectious. It's going to hunt down people who are not vaccinated, and it's going to make a large number of those people sick. I mean, a third of people have at least one symptom for more than 6 months, and then there are people that end up being respiratory cripples.
Dr. Jarman says he's not yet done the modelling of what a Delta outbreak in Taranaki would mean in terms of case numbers and hospitalisations. Meanwhile, Ngā iwi o Taranaki are working with the police to monitor the border south of Mokau, while Waikato iwi Ngāti Maniapoto are doing the same in the north. Te kotahitanga o Te Atiawa chairperson, Liana Potu, says iwi called for the checkpoints, which are being run by police.
We haven't pushed to have our people out at this point, manning those checkpoints because of our low vaccination rates, and we don't want to put them at risk out there.
Ms Potu says the creep of COVID outside of Auckland is a wake-up call to people to get vaccinated.
You know, we're concerned that if it gets into our community, our whānau being under-vaccinated and also having underlying health conditions doesn't bode well for our people.
New Plymouth Mayor Neil Holdham doesn't think it's possible to keep Delta out.
I don't think so. I think that, as I say, I think if we are good with our border enforcement, we might keep it out for 2 or 3 more weeks, and that will just allow us to get those vaccination numbers up, because it is a concern that we're the lowest region pretty much in New Zealand.
He says those rates are important for lowering the impact of any outbreak.
The big concern is that our health system could be overwhelmed, and then our medical professionals have to make those really hideous decisions about who to treat when they only have limited resources and too many patients.
Usually a beacon of optimism, the Chief Executive of the Taranaki Chamber of Commerce, Arun Chowdhury, is also resigned to Delta's arrival in the province.
It is inevitable, as we can see, and we just need to make sure that at this stage we get those vaccinations done to as high a number as possible. I think the business community wants to see action, and they're obviously preparing for the inevitability of the Delta virus in the Taranaki community.
The government is due to review the Level 3 border on Monday.
It is 22 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. And a reminder, we will cross to the Beehive Theaterette at 6:30 tonight for a media conference with the COVID-19 Response Minister, and that is on the unfolding situation in Northland. Australia is making moves for lockdown restrictions to become a thing of the past, but is preparing for another battle as people learn to live with the virus. In New South Wales alone, the insurance regulator is expecting a compensation bill of more than $600 million as more people catch the virus at their work. The ABC's Gavin Coote has more.
As essential businesses keep operating during the wave of Delta outbreaks, Sydney lawyer Michael Toomer is busily working through COVID-related compensation claims.
One of the things that's interesting about what's going on is that we've conditioned people into thinking about this as a public health order issue. But really there's an underlying duty of care that applies, and that continues to apply.
New South Wales is among a number of states that passed laws during the pandemic that means essential health and retail workers who get COVID are assumed to have become infected at work. But within days, many non-essential industries in New South Wales will start coming back to life and, as Michael Toomer points out, face the likelihood that some staff could get COVID.
What I expect will happen is that as other industries become open, then the sectors affected will grow.
The State Insurance Regulatory Authority is expecting it'll cost up to $638 million in New South Wales over the next 12 months. That's based on the assumption 80% of adults are fully vaccinated. Shadow Treasurer Daniel Mulkey thinks the surge in claims could push up insurance premiums.
Opening up will be a crunch point for the workers' compensation system. It has not ever had to deal with something like COVID-19. The last time we had a major global pandemic, which was the Spanish flu, we didn't have workers' compensation schemes.
Tim Concannon is a leading personal injury lawyer who's starting to see a number of COVID-related claims trickle through and expects things to get a lot busier once both the vaccinated and unvaccinated are able to go back to work in the coming months.
because at the moment, I mean, in my industry, there's virtually no one at the office other than a skeleton staff, and clearly there's going to be some far elevated degree of interaction both in the workplace and outside the workplace.
Yeah, does this start to get more complex when, say, you're in an office setting or you work somewhere that isn't an essential workplace and you might be catching public transport and you might be socialising a lot more?
Exactly. Hopefully scientific testing will be able to assist in working out whether work has been a main contributing factor or not, but I'm not sure you can necessarily have that level of assurance.
Questions remain around whether businesses should be liable for the long-term health impacts of COVID-19 among employees. Bernie Smith is from the Shop Distributive and Allied Employees Association, which represents retail and fast food workers.
All of our members who've been exposed to COVID in the workplace and have had time off have been fully paid by their employers. That's something which we've already worked through. Our biggest concern is making sure that those people are protected if there's any lingering issues associated with COVID, as has been reported to different levels.
And the state of Victoria is on day 64 of its latest lockdown and edging closer to more freedoms. The state is expected to have double vaccinated 70% of the population by the end of the month. Having already hit the 70% milestone, New South Wales will have its lockdown lifted on Monday, but not everybody will be rushing out the door. The ABC's Isabel Rowe reports.
It's been a long winter in lockdown for millions of people, and for many, isolation has become so normal that the old normal will come as a shock.
I'm not particularly excited, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a bit overwhelming trying to think about it, but I'm sure it'll be good once you get used to it again.
Have you made any plans yet?
I think I've made 2 plans. I have 2 bookings at a bar and that's it really.
When restrictions ease on Monday, it will have been 107 days that Greater Sydney residents have been unable to see groups of family and friends, get their hair cut, sit at a restaurant or see work colleagues. Melissa Valenti from Sydney's Inner West is nervous about what easing restrictions will mean, particularly as her 2 young children can't yet get a vaccine.
And I'm actually quite apprehensive, having been in lockdown for so long and I suppose conditioned to not going out, not mingling in crowds, not seeing people standing far apart, and it just sort of feels like the floodgates are going to open up.
Brooke Nerthen from Sydney's Sutherland Shire feels the same.
Yeah, it's going to be really weird. It's just going to be bizarre for the first time being around lots of people and, you know, things like just people coughing now in my sphere is a bit triggering, you know.
And it's not just the adults with some readjusting to do. Brooke Nerthen's 5-year-old boy is going back to kindy on the 18th of October.
That's really nerve-wracking for him too. You know, he's had months and months off school now, so he's feeling a bit apprehensive about that as well.
Cognitive neuropsychologist from Swinburne University, Professor Susan Rossell, says there is a scientific explanation for that feeling.
So a lot of the hormones, the neurotransmitters that would be fluctuating in quite large degrees pre-COVID, they've all gone into a little bit of hibernation. Same as maybe if you've been in prison for a long time or, lost on some kind of tropical island. And actually, for many of us, these new experiences become, they're new and they're foreign again. So basically what we're seeing again is threat responses.
The good news, she says, is that our brains are remarkably adaptable.
This isn't something that we have to put, too much impetus on. So we just need to make sure that we're kind to our brains and give ourselves a bit of a break in between those exciting times of going to see family and friends.
And in breaking news, the government has announced that Northland will move to alert level 3 tonight. That will happen at 11:59 this evening following recent information on the risk presented by a positive case. This is a person who was tested earlier in the week in Whangārei and their positive test result confirmed in Auckland yesterday. Person's now in managed isolation, quarantine in Auckland. Now, they say that the case appears to have travelled extensively around Northland Northland after travelling there on the 2nd of October. Restrictions will remain in place in Northland until 11:59pm on Tuesday, and the Auckland boundary will stay in place. In terms of the travel, the information that they have at the moment is that they were in Northland, this person, between the 2nd of October until the evening of the 6th of October. They are believed to have travelled around the region, including to Whangārei, Kāmoa, Paihia, Kawakawa, and then returned to Auckland. Now, Chris Hipkins, the COVID response minister, says it is unusual to put a region into alert level 3 when there are no further cases. However, it's vitally important that we get ahead of any potential spread and set up widespread testing and continue contact tracing efforts. They have already identified some locations of interest, so we direct you to the Ministry of Health website there under locations of interest, but the ones to hand are the BP Connect on Wiley's petrol station at 49 Monu Road, Woodhill, Whangārei, and this is on the 2nd of October from 11:20pm to 12:20am on the 3rd of October. The Z at Kensington Service Station, corner of Kāmoa and Nixon Street in Whangārei, from 3:45pm to 4:45pm on October the 4th. Those sites are on the Ministry of Health's website under locations of interest. People are being told to stay home and get tested as soon as possible if they have any symptoms, and to continue to check the website for locations of interest and instructions. Now, the Minister is making his way to the Beehive Theaterette to update us on the situation in Northland, and we will cross live to that now.
Kia ora everybody, good evening. Ministers convened this evening after receiving additional information on the movements of an individual who travelled to Northland this week. Based on advice from public health officials, we have agreed to move Northland to alert level 3 from 11:59pm this evening for an initial period of 4 days until 11:59pm on Tuesday night. Cabinet will review these settings when it meets again on Monday. This measure is being taken out of an abundance of caution, given that there aren't at this point additional identified cases in Northland that we are aware of. It is also being taken, however, because the individual has not been cooperative with contact tracing efforts. We haven't been able to identify their exact movements, and we do have some information to suggest that they were not travelling alone. Our understanding at this stage is that the person was in Northland from the afternoon of the 2nd of October until the evening of the 6th of October. Based on information from the police, we believe they've travelled widely around the region, including in Whangārei, Kāmoa, Paihia and Kawakawa, before returning to Auckland. Initial locations of interest, the BP Connect at Wiley's, at 49 Manu Road in Woodhill, Whangārei, between 11:20pm and 12:20am on the 2nd and 3rd of October. At the Z Kensington Service Station on the corner of Kāmoa Road and Nixon Street, Whangārei, from 3:45pm to 4:45pm on the 4th of October. The other factor that we have taken into account is that vaccination rates in Northland are low compared to the national average, and without placing restrictions on movement, there is a possibility that the virus could spread quite rapidly within the community. Vaccination rates in Northland sit at 70% for first dose and 48% for second. For Māori, that rate is lower at 52% first dose and 32% fully vaccinated. Similar to our recent move to alert level 3 in the Waikato, cases spreading at alert level 2 are a risk that we cannot take. But there's also further reason why we need to really focus on vaccinations. Without high vaccination rates, we'll need to continue to use restrictions to stop the virus spreading. So I have two things to ask of Northlanders. First, if you have any cold and flu-like symptoms, please come forward and get a test as soon as possible. Testing centres are operating throughout the region, including at Kaitaia Hospital, one Samari Place in Kirikiri, the Dargaville Hospital and 20 Winga Crescent in Kāmoa, and Pohi Island in Whangārei. Also keep checking the Ministry of Health website, where we will update on any further locations of interest as we manage to get that information. The second request that I have is, and I can't stress this enough, is please get vaccinated. These cases do highlight the risks of COVID-19 to the unvaccinated. Anywhere in the country, we've seen the Delta outbreak jumping borders and finding unvaccinated people. I know a lot of people are happy to get vaccinated, but they're waiting, saying that they're not quite sure whether they're ready to get vaccinated yet. With low vaccination rates across the Northland region, now is the time to be vaccinated to protect your children, vulnerable people in your communities, your elders and loved ones. Information on vaccine centres on vaccine centres that will be available over the weekend is on the HealthPoint website, and you can also go to bookmyvaccine.nz to see what locations are available close to where you live. A reminder that alert level 3 means that you need to stay in your bubble and stay at home. You need to limit your movement. That's how we break the trains of transmission if any have already been spreading within the community. So please don't go and visit family, friends and neighbours. This is a virus that can spread quite quickly, and that is part of the way it spreads. We do need you to stay home, to get tested and to get vaccinated. Jessica.
So Northland has been left in limbo for many hours with no locations of interest, no indication about what's going on. Why did it take so long?
It has been very difficult to get information about this particular case. The first test result we had was what you could describe as an indeterminate test result. So it was quite difficult to locate the person. The information that they supplied when they were tested the first time did not provide sufficient information to be able to contact them with the test result and get them back to be tested. It took quite some time to track them down. The police ultimately were able to assist there and did help to track the person down. We then had to get the second test result. They have not been particularly forthcoming with their movements.
Has the person got gang affiliations, and are they cooperating with the process?
The person's not cooperating with the process, and I don't have any information to suggest at this point that there are gang affiliations.
So what do you mean by that, though?
I don't have information one way or the other to confirm whether or not they're involved in a gang or have any connection with a gang. That information has not yet been determined. I'll come over to you.
What are the reasons and rationale for not cooperating with health officials?
Well, they haven't given one, and so at this point I don't know why they're not providing the information.
Why was the person allowed to travel to Northland and back to Auckland?
My understanding was that the person... my understanding at this point, and I want to be clear that this is not yet verified, is that the person obtained a document by providing false information in order to get the document to travel across the border. By the time the falsity of that information had been identified and the document had been revoked, they were already in Northland at that point.
So what were they doing in Northland? What was the purpose of them being there?
I don't have that information. They have not supplied the reason for being there. My understanding is that they obtained if this is correct, that the travel document they obtained was under the social services category, and that when the evidence that they supplied was reviewed, that exemption, that permit, if you like, to travel, was revoked. I'll come up to you. Sorry, Amelia.
Do you have any idea of the number of contacts it has? You said it's travelled widely, but do you know ballpark figure?
No, we don't, and that's partly because the person themselves hasn't been providing that information. The information that we have has been what the police have been able to identify so far using their networks, and so at this point the information's still pretty patchy.
And the person that they travelled with, are they also in managed isolation now?
No, and it's been very difficult to identify who that person is. My understanding, and this is only very recent, so I haven't been able to verify that, is that person has now been identified, and so work will be underway to try and track that person down.
Where they are.
And that is the COVID response minister at that press conference there, saying that Northland is going into alert level 3 restrictions from 11:59 tonight, following confirmation of that positive case. While Whangārei Mayor Cheryl Mai joins us now. Good evening, Cheryl. Well, actually, it's probably not. It's not good, is it?
Not a good evening. No, I'm actually quite grumpy.
And why is that?
Well, we've got a person who really has done everything that they should not do, and they've impacted all of Northland as a result. So I was giving the person the benefit of the doubt earlier today. Now I am just, really ropeable.
When did you find out the exact details?
Right now.
No heads up at all?
No, well, we were given the heads up that there were that the press conference was going to be happening, and that we should be preparing for an alert level change. But the details about the case and the person, this is all information that's going to be new to most people, and frankly, it's unacceptable.
Where does it leave your district? Because you don't have the best vaccination rates.
Yeah, so we've now got, we're facing 4 days of lockdown, and, that'll impact people who have prepared things for the weekend, for next week. Everybody is now going to have to scramble and make dramatic changes to the way they operate. And it just means that we are on tenterhooks waiting to see if this person has infected others, because you're right, our vaccination rates are not good, and we strongly encourage everybody to get out there and get their vaccine. We're grateful to the many who have, but there are still too many who haven't.
Cheryl, I'm sure you've been chatting to people through the day. Are people nervous?
I think as I've been going around today, there was almost a resignation that this could be the outcome. However, it's school holidays. It's all of the things that we kind of want our community to be out and celebrating, because it's the school holidays and we've got people coming north. This was a chance for our economy to benefit from the holidays. Now that's been damaged as well.
Obviously, this is an individual and plus one, it seems, who have broken all the rules, and according to the COVID minister there, obtained falsely documents enabling them to enter into Northland. But I'm just wondering, do you have broader concerns about that border with Auckland?
I guess we're relying on people doing the right thing, and when people are doing the wrong thing and abusing these systems, innocent people get affected by that. So yeah, I must admit, at this point in time, I would really like to find out more about where this person has been. They've been not giving information to the authorities, so we're in limbo land. It's not good.
What would you say to that person if you could talk to them right now?
I would say, did you even consider the fact that you're putting us at risk? It's just not fair.
The information that we have is obviously they've been there from 2nd of October till October the 6th, so a number of days. And so far, Whangārei ka mōpai here kawakawa before returning to Auckland. What are your worst fears here, Cheryl?
That at every point of entry and connection with our community, they may have infected our people, and we really are not ready for that. Could I say complacent? We were hopeful that because of the border and Auckland being locked down, we were accepting that was a sacrifice that we had to make. But now we've got somebody who's potentially brought this disease to Northland, and that's unacceptable.
Cheryl, do you think it is complacency rather than, being vaccine hesitant that has seen your numbers lag behind other areas?
We've had anti-vaxxers who have been campaigning, and alongside the vaccination clinics, we've been wanting to get the message through that the way that we can remain safe and protected is to get vaccinated. And I have to say that there have been an awful lot of people who have been just doing the right thing, and some have been hesitant. This may trigger them into doing the right thing. So, is that a good thing? Yes, but at risk of having this COVID, the Delta variant in our region, that's far too high a cost.
Thank you for joining us this evening, and best of luck. That is the Whangārei Mayor, Cheryl Mai. University of Otago epidemiologist Professor Michael Baker joins us now. Michael, it looks potentially like it could be the perfect storm. How worried should we be?
Well, kia ora. This is very concerning. Normally, of course, in this scenario, contact tracing is extremely helpful at telling us about the person's lines of transmission, and it gives us an idea of how much concern we should have about the situation. But if the person's unhelpful at identifying their contacts, then we can't really do that normal risk assessment
So in those situations, then we fall back on vaccination rates, right? But we know that the area that this person's been travelling through have very poor vaccination rates. So they are, how exposed are they?
Well, depending on who they've had contact with, they could be very exposed. And we know that there's very little barrier in the way of this virus at alert level 2 because most people are getting around and doing their normal activities. It's possible they're not even following alert level 2 restrictions, not wearing masks indoors and that kind of thing. So it is very concerning. I mean, this is why we do rely on the alert level system moving up. And alert level 3 does put pretty strong barriers in the way of transmission of this virus. So that's really the next step that I think had to be done.
Is it far enough? Would you have gone straight to 4?
Well, again, hopefully there will be a bit more information will emerge about this person's patterns of contact. But yeah, this is a really problematic situation if you don't have that information. Usually we have that, and that means that you get some sense of how long the person's been in the community, how many other people they might have had contact with. So perhaps we'll get that information shortly, and that will give a better idea about whether even more restrictions are required.
So basically we're flying blind at the moment, and that must mean we're relying on large turnout for people to get tested in order to try and quantify the problem. Would that be a fair assessment?
Yeah, we've got that testing, and also we've got wastewater testing. So we've got good tools to tell us about what might happen, but they only give you an idea about the some of the cases, and unfortunately you can get a lot of transmission before it might be tested or detected through people getting sick in the community or wastewater testing. And there's always this endless problem that you're looking backwards in time, because at the moment cases we're seeing today are people who are probably exposed maybe 7 or 10 days ago. So we will have to play that terrible waiting game to see if there are other infected people in that area.
So we will, at 11:59 tonight, right, have the Northland area in level 3. Auckland is at a version of level 3 with a couple of extra privileges. We've got the Waikato, a massive chunk, also in strict level 3. Do we need just to lock down the whole North Island?
Well, I don't think we're quite at that stage, but yes, I mean, that is one scenario. I mean, one of the questions, of course, is what strategy New Zealand's going to pursue from now on, because we've actually had a very confused messages this week about a number of things, including what comes after elimination, which we seem to be transitioning out of, and that hasn't been made clear, and also how we're going to use the alert level system, because Auckland is using a stepped approach. They're stepping up. The rest of the country has got alert levels and is stepping down. There's also a traffic light system that's being proposed, circulating at the moment. So I think this week has really been quite poor for clarity of communication and coherence. So I think the government really has to sort out where we're going. And one of the approaches I think we should look at would actually be a regional approach, where we say that clearly pursuing, I think, suppression in Auckland, we're hopefully we could pursue elimination for the rest of the country, and particularly the South Island. And if you look at Australia, for example, they currently have 5 states and territories that are successfully eliminating the virus and 3 pursuing suppression. And Tasmania has now gone for over 500 days without any cases, a bit like the South Island. So I think we do need to refresh our strategy in the light of where we're at the moment.
Michael, we can have all the strategy and all the rules in the world, right? But if people don't follow those rules, which seems to be the case here very strongly, we've got people who are breaking the rules and just doing their own thing. I mean, how do we get people back on board? Because some of them are tired and had enough.
Yeah, I think that fatigue is a problem. And then I think, unfortunately, we have people who are really not following the rules at all and have big contact networks. And we talk about marginalised people in Auckland, and that is what really sustained the outbreak for the last 4 weeks there. And we got down to very low numbers, but it was very tough, those last few cases. And I think it was a similar scenario to the one we've got at the moment of people who were very uncooperative. And so that is what is driving our outbreak at the moment. So we have to factor that into our thinking. And we don't want to impose lockdowns if we can possibly avoid them, because they are very destructive and they do harm to obviously to people who have the least resources. Again, I think this is all part of a refresh I think we need of our strategy at the moment.
Michael, this person was obviously pretty determined in the sense that they appear to have falsified documentation, which is, that's a significant commitment to getting over the border. So the border is porous. If people want to get over it, they will, right? Do we need to say that you have to be vaccinated to move from one region to the next, that you have to have had at least one jab?
Yes, I think that's a basic minimum. And also a test. And of course, this is a role for, obviously we've got the PCR testing, which is very good, the standard. In addition, we could do a rapid test on the side of the road as well. This testing is obviously coming in very late. So I think we need to look at this much more, particularly if we take a regional approach, which I think actually it's sustainable in Australia and it could work here.
Really appreciate your time this evening. That is Professor Michael Baker, Otago University epidemiologist. Now, if you are just joining us, Northland will shift into Alert Level 3 from 11:59 tonight. It comes after a woman tested positive after travelling from Auckland to Northland for 4 days between October 2nd and October 6th. In the past hour, COVID Response Minister Chris Hipkins has held a press conference. He says the woman has been uncooperative and police are involved. He would not confirm rumours the person was a sex worker. He said she had travelled extensively throughout the region. Now, our reporter Nita Blake-Person is in Whangārei and joins me now. Nita, how are people reacting to this news?
On the streets of Whangārei tonight, Lisa, they're pretty shocked. I have been the one to tell several people because it's just come so out of the blue and the information hasn't quite trickled down yet. But people who, had heard that there was a case, but nothing more all day. We haven't had any updates on locations of interest. So I think people started their weekend, were on that kind of buzz, and now it's just trickling through that as of midnight back to level 3. So the people I've spoken to, it's shocked. The food shops are kind of doing orders through to midnight, but they're getting ready for hunkering down again.
Nita, can you just remind us, what do we know about this case so far?
So on the 2nd of October, they are understood to have travelled north to Northland, posing as an essential worker or having some type of documentation which allowed them to get across the border. They've travelled seemingly quite extensively through the north, Kawakawa, Paihia, Kamor, Whangārei, before then getting another test to head back across. And it's that second test which seems to have come back, confirmed a stronger positive result last night. And since then, this case has been quite uncooperative. So health authorities are having trouble finding out exactly what their movements are. We've got some locations of interest now, a couple of service stations in Whangārei, but people will be certainly on edge as they wait to see the extent of the travels and where this virus may have travelled.
And there's also an indication that they might not just be tracking this woman. She may have had company.
Yes, it sounds like they're still working out exactly who she has been involved with and where they've been, but because there is such opposition to helping authorities, it's not yet known the extent of that. But there are other people, and it does sound like there's been a lot of travel involved with this trip to Northland.
So, not the best vaccination rates up your way. I mean, is this going to change people's attitudes, do you think?
Well, today, even with the threat, without this knowledge that there had been extensive travel and just that initial weak positive and then a stronger one last night, people did seem to have been a little bit energised. There was a big uptick at the Seminole Stadium today with vaccination. People had kind of held off getting tested. There were some people maybe having symptoms or getting ready to cross the border who were having all of that testing done. But in terms of like a massive turnout, I think people were waiting for those locations of interest before they saw what possible risk there may be to them. So the people I spoke to today kind of thought the only real positive to come out of this could have been that it might shake people into vaccinations and really driving those rates up because, as you say, they are not good up here and really dangerous for some populations.
And so what are people being told to do now?
If anyone is symptomatic, they're being asked to be tested, but it will be interesting to see how those tests are set up because some of the smaller places throughout Taitokerau only have testing on at certain times. So Chris Hipkins indicated in that press conference that that was being worked through at the moment. I'm sure that they will want to put a lot of staff and a lot of energy into widespread testing. And the message loud and clear, as always, was get vaccinated. So perhaps tomorrow there will be a bit of a rush as people head out for that first or second dose.
Thanks, Nita. That is Nita Blake-Person joining us live there from Whangārei. Now our health correspondent Rowan Quinn joins me. Rowan, normally contact tracing is how we ring-fence situations like this, but it's problematic really, isn't it?
No, that's right. We heard the Minister, Chris Hipkins, saying that this person's not been cooperative at all. And as you say, it's usually the opposite often in these cases, where we hear about individuals. We're often hearing how they've been good contact good scanners and really helpful. But yeah, the opposite here, they've been, I guess it started right when they applied to be able to go over the border. They gave false information there. Then when they were tested, they didn't have the right information. They'd given a phone number that authorities couldn't use. And then, now are failing to provide the details of where they've been and who they've seen.
So the region moving up a level at midnight tonight, basically going to level 3. Normally what dictates the shift in level is that there are other cases. This is quite unusual, isn't it, to move so quickly, Rowan?
That's right. I guess it was a little bit like what we saw, when Auckland first moved down as well, that just that uncertainty and could this person have spread COVID further. And I guess because they have been to a number of places, they've been to a few places in Whangārei, Kāmore, they went to Paihia. So, and because they're not actually saying exactly where they've been and who they've seen, there is that uncertainty of where COVID could have spread. So, by cutting movement, it cuts the ability for other people to then spread it further. And of course, Chris Hipkins, the Minister there, saying that the vaccination rates in Northland are also an issue because it's only 70% vaccinated for a first dose, that is, lower than the rest of the country, and that is a problem for, potential spread. He's saying again there that perhaps if it had been higher, perhaps they might not have needed to go to a level 3 lockdown. And we also know that in parts of Northland it's much lower than 70% with just one vaccination. It's down in the 40s in some areas.
So, Rowan, it's going to be reviewed, I think, from memory Monday, right? So what will they be looking out for over the next few days when they're considering how to manage this and whether to move either way with alert levels?
Well, I think the big thing is going to be testing, and Chris Hipkins put that plea out to people there to come forward and get tested. There have been some testing centres going in Whangārei today, and another one's going to open, I think he said, in Paihia tomorrow. So he's saying, please turn up and get a test. They'll want to see that there's lots of checking to see whether it's got out and whether it's in the community or not. And of course, also, if they can get more information from the woman, the case that, has tested positive there, if they're able to find out where she's been and ring fence each of those other contacts, then that would be another way to have some surety to come out, I guess, if they feel that the risk is ring fence, they know where it is. But of course, at the moment, it's all uncertainty.
Rowan, can you put it in context for us? Because, Northland's not on its own moving to level 3.
That's right. We've got, well, of course, Auckland. We've been here for a while now, 7.5 weeks. Waikato is also at level 3, and as we know, that has spread from one little part of Waikato further a couple of times now. And so I guess, gosh, it's a worry, isn't it? It's that delta sort of radiating out from Auckland where, the cases are just continuing each day, a few dozen each day. And I guess with people coming and going over the border, then there is always going to be that risk that it's going to spread, especially in those places that are closest to Auckland.
Thank you for that, Rowan. That is our health correspondent, Rowan Quinn. Now, if you're just joining us, just to recap, Northland is moving into alert level 3 restrictions from 11:59 this evening, and that follows this now confirmed case of a woman who travelled from Auckland to Northland and all around Northland and back out again. It appears her travel took place from the 2nd of October to the 6th of October. And as we understand from Chris Hipkins, the COVID response minister, there is the allegation that she used falsified documents documents to gain entry to Northland, posing as in the social services category. Once that was discovered, she was already over the border. They've had problems tracking her down, and she is now described as being non-cooperative. It appears there may have been another person travelling with her also, who they have now managed to identify, but clearly the police have been helping track this woman's movements, which makes it very difficult in terms of contact tracing. Hence the decision to move Northland into alert level 3, even though currently there is only one case. People are being asked, please, to get vaccinated and get a test. Testing centres are operating in Northland at Kaitaia Hospital, Samari Place in Kerikeri, Dargaville Hospital, 20 Winger Crescent in Carmel, and Pohi Island in Whangārei.
RNZ News at 7. Good